Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. I've become friends with school shooters. I've become friends with school shooters.
This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. What you heard there was what we call a Freudian slip, which is an unintentional error regarded as revealing subconscious feelings, or just revealing the truth, of course. And if you didn't hear what he just said, that is your vice presidential nominee, communist Tim Walz, who again is one and the same with J.D. Vance. These guys are all friends. These people are all working together, keeping us divided. And of course, he reveals the truth right there on national television for everyone to hear. If you didn't hear him, he said that he has become friends with quote-unquote school shooters. Here, listen again.
I've become friends with school shooters. I've become friends with school shooters.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. You can't make up the stuff that we're seeing being revealed to us on a day in and day out basis. Now, of course, everybody out there will say that he just misspoke, but that really summarizes the world that we're living in. Now, do people misspeak? Well, of course people misspeak. Do I misspeak sometimes because I speak too fast here and there? Yes, of course. But if you know everything that's going on in regards to false flags and in regards to psychological operations that the government plays on the citizens of the United States of America, well, then you know for a fact that that probably wasn't an actual slip. He probably has become friends with some of those people, even though a lot of those people are supposedly no longer walking the earth. Maybe he was hanging out with them over in Tel Aviv. Maybe he was hanging out with them underneath the White House, or maybe even just in those underground tunnels that we know are connected to that pizza place over in Washington, or Emerald City maybe. He's hanging out with them somewhere, and of course we know that the majority of these people who carry out these events never die in the first place, even though they tell us that they die, because remember, a dead man can tell no lies. A dead man can tell no story. A dead man is just that, a dead man. And with a dead man, you have no trials. And without any trials, well, there is no evidence. And without any evidence, well, you can't question the narrative. And if you can't question the narrative, then again, you allow the government to create the news and manufacture and manipulate it. So the vice presidential debates took place, and millions of people sat and watched this, and I combed through it for everybody out there because the pressing issues that people out there need to hear about and learn about, in addition to the left and the right working together, is some of these things that they will not discuss and they will gatekeep for. And the conservatives are gatekeeping for weather modification and weather control. It is the most important issue that everybody needs to focus on moving forward. Everybody is looking for another outbreak. Everybody is looking for the government to go into World War III. These are all things that are likely to occur as well. But if you don't understand what's happening with the climate, you're going to get enslaved in the blink of an eye. And the conservatives play this narrative of climate cult, green, clean energy, and natural gas. And it's really become a debate over, well, you know, there's something wrong with the climate, but that doesn't mean we should switch to green energy. And what they should be talking about is how the United States government is murdering innocent civilians using weather modification and weather control. So during this debate, the climate initiative becomes the topic. They talk about Hurricane Helene. They talk about all of the poor, unfortunate people who have lost their homes, lost their lives, lost their pets, and all have no idea what just happened to them. Because in the blink of an eye, the government came and wiped out town after town after town, and then blamed it on the boogeyman. So if you don't understand what's occurring, climate change is not real. Climate change is an excuse the government is using so that you eventually change the way that you live and change the way that you behave. It's also serving as a boogeyman because the government is using weather modification and weather control to wipe out people's homes, to move people like cattle and make certain areas of land uninhabitable where the government could come in after one of these storms and say, look, we can't let anyone live here anymore. It's not livable. It's not a livable area. The government has the right to take and seize that land. And that's what they're doing. And they're hurting people, and they're going to move them into smart cities. They're going to move them into areas that they want to move them into. And they're flooding people out deliberately. Look up the weather patterns that the government has. They have thousands of weather patterns when it comes to cloud seeding, and they have dozens of weather patterns when it comes to having the ability to steer and create hurricanes and tornadoes. And that's exactly what's occurring. But the Conservative Party continues to foo-foo the climate change initiative by saying that it has something to do with green energy. And that is a part of all of this, getting you to go electric, getting you to change how you live, getting you to eat what they tell you to eat to reduce carbon emissions is all part of turning you into a prisoner. But if the Republican Party, which they won't do, which shows you that they're compromised, but if the Republican Party was actually for the people, they would bring up weather modification, weather control, something that I've shown you the clips of JFK, Lyndon B. Johnson talking about having the ability to control the weather. We all know about HARP. And many people out there need to become aware that those 5G towers that have gone up all around the earth right now have the ability to directionally operate and assist hurricanes using frequency waves. They can steer these things where they want to steer them, and they're hitting places that are actual targets. These are not random spots. There's even lots of proof that in North Carolina, the specific areas that they target were areas that they're going to mine for lithium batteries. And again, this is all part of getting you to go green. And the point of getting you to go green is so that you are in a vehicle that can be controlled. You are living in a home that can be controlled via smart tech. This is all about behavioral control. This all goes back to Larry Fink talking about we're going to force behaviors. They're going to force it. The more they hit places with these massive hurricanes, the more they do this stuff over and over, the people are going to believe that there is something going on with the weather. And there is. Just they're going to believe it's the boogeyman the government created, called climate change. They will never, ever think that the government themselves have the ability to do this because the Republican Party gatekeeps for them. The Republican Party doesn't reveal anything about cloud seeding or anything about all of these patents the government has, including things like Operation Popeye, where admittedly our government was able to create monsoons during wars. The government has the ability to do it, and the Republican Party won't admit that. They want you to think that climate change is a liberal thing because they want to get rid of natural gas, instead of the citizens realizing that these people, these psychopaths in power, are literally ruining and destroying people's lives. And this right here, this clip I'm going to play for you, where they talk about, well, the American people are noticing weird patterns and all weird weather developments. This plays into the left-right so well, because as they continue to hit us with these hurricanes, they're going to make this a political thing. And they're going to make it a political thing where conservatives deny weather change and climate change. Democrats say we need change. So the Democrats, the same people who are still wearing masks, are going to call for people to change the way they live and people to go green, and they're all going to be on board. And they're going to blame conservatives for all this stuff going on with the weather because they refused to get on board with the climate initiative. And if we go into red and blue states, I've been saying it for a long time now, those red states are going to be sitting ducks for these attacks. This is them talking at the debate about climate change.
Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change?
And Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. A lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns.
So you could hear just how laughable their narrative is, right? You could hear the moderators even saying that these hurricanes are becoming bigger and bigger and bigger because of the carbon emissions. They're becoming larger scaled hurricanes than we've ever seen before. And the reason they're becoming larger scaled hurricanes than we've ever seen before is because the government is manipulating them. They're using geoengineering to create these massive, massive weather patterns that we have not seen before. And you could clearly watch the way that these patterns develop and places that they're targeting, and they look like they're targeting specific areas because they are. And like I said earlier, they will have the ability, after hitting these places with hurricanes, to come in and seize that land. So if you own a home there and you think you're going to get your house rebuilt and you somehow survive, even if your home survives, if they want that area taken, they will come in and take it. They have the ability to do that. They can seize your land based on saying that it is not safe to live here. It is not livable anymore. You must leave now. And they're going to continue to do this to American citizens. And then on the flip side, these citizens are going to continue to give up their God-given rights and freedoms to enslaving themselves with smart technology and electric vehicles that the government can and will control. Most people think that this is a crazy conspiracy because they can't get past the mind control that has been pushed into their minds since they were young about being able to control the weather. We all heard these things about you can't control Mother Nature. These are all things they've done deliberately. So it's almost impossible for these people to wrap their heads around what's going on. And for people out there who don't understand about HAARP, understand this. HAARP has the ability to manipulate and modify the weather. You factor in the chemtrailing and the geoengineering that's been going on, and then those 5G towers that went up while everybody was locked down. Those towers do have the ability to steer these storms. Those 5G towers are literally a new version of HAARP technology that are all around us now. They're not just sitting up in Alaska. And if you took those things down, you would notice no difference with your cell phone. You would notice your cell phones are not offline. What you would notice is that suddenly it's becoming more difficult for the government to actually steer these things. But they need everybody, the left and the right, on board with climate change being a real thing. And you have to remember, the climate is being manipulated. There is weird science going on. Like he said, there is weird patterns going on with the weather, and it's because they're doing it. It's not because of cow farts and carbon emissions. It's the government. It's a group of psychopaths who are steering and using the weather not only to ruin and destroy our lives, to hurt us like cattle and eventually get us to enslave ourselves with a carbon footprint. That is what's coming out of it. The other thing to discuss, and please pay attention to this, is them talking about censorship and hate speech, because this is a big topic. And of course, they are convincing Democrats out there that the First Amendment does not protect certain types of speech. And we're now at a point where they use hate speech and things like incitement to lawless action. They're trying to use wording like that so that people out there think that people like me and you are not protected under free speech. We don't even have to call for violence or lawlessness or anything. They literally will hear me talking about the weather and say that that's not protected under the First Amendment. Listen to them talking here. And of course, this is a new common talking point to bring about censorship, is saying you can't yell fire in a crowded theater if there isn't a fire. These are the types of psychological ops that they're using on the masses to convince them that we need to censor speech. And censoring speech is all about them protecting themselves, because sooner or later, people are going to figure out that the government is responsible for all of this, that they're responsible for these weather events that are occurring. They're responsible for these events that happen at schools. They're responsible for all of it. And they're working together against the citizens of the earth as we speak. So they're hell-bent on bringing about censorship. And they really can only do it via technology, because if we all get offline, they're going to have a tough time censoring what we all say to each other. But they know as long as everybody's on the internet and everybody's in the hive, that they'll be able to control speech and, in fact, criminalize speech. But listen to them. I can't even believe we're talking about this as a topic, using things like hate speech to talk about who could say what and who can't say what.
But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said.
And of course, this is a common theme among Democrats. If you haven't heard some of these clips, Walz has said this before. John Kerry just recently talked about putting Democrats back in power so that they can change what the First Amendment is. And we're heading towards changing what the First Amendment is. Keep in mind, when the Republicans scream about the First Amendment, they're talking about a lot of these baby issues. They're talking about, oh, you heard him discuss, well, kids shouldn't be wearing masks. Not that that's a baby issue, but they don't care about topics like that getting censored. They're just planting seeds and setting a precedent with things like that. What they care about is the stuff that I discuss and you discuss about what the government's really doing, government patents on weather modification, the false flag events that they create, the psyops that they create, the secret societies, the Freemasons, all of these things that make people go, oh, wow, now I understand how this thing is actually working, because it's very hard for people to go from point A to point Z and say, well, how would they all be working together? How did all these people get put in power? What's the common thing that they have that helps them network among each other, which are the secret societies that they're a part of? But listen to them. This is the talking point of the Democrats, criminalizing speech. And of course, using themes like, well, it's dangerous speech, it's misinformation, speaking against the climate's misinformation, right? It makes it real dangerous. It's only dangerous for them if people realize what they're doing, because they'll realize that we have a bunch of mass murderers who are calling the shots and then manipulating you into giving them more power.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
There's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities in order to guarantee that you're going to have, some accountability on facts, et cetera. But look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick, and, has an agenda, and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence. So what we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern by hopefully having, winning enough votes that you're free to be able to implement change.
So this entire thing is just becoming a joke now. It really is. I mean, we're talking about censoring free speech, calling it hate speech, calling certain speech could incite violence. These are all things that are open to interpretation, but the mind control sheeple don't really realize that. Now, conservatives are obviously for free speech and for debate. Democrats, who are now communists, are not for free speech. They are not even for debate. It's their way or nothing. They will not listen. Their brains cannot be penetrated for the most part. They're completely lost and completely gone at this point. They're on board with the digital ID. They're on board with all these things that are going to enslave them. And eventually they will see that the government is in fact rogue, and the government will turn on them because all the things that they pander to right now, like the LGBT and everything else, well, eventually these people are going to get turned on also. And all the stuff that they think is in their favor and the government is here to coddle them and care about them, that's not going to last very long once everything is in place, because they're using them to bring about censorship. They're using them and getting them to agree that certain speech is dangerous. And eventually when they figure out what's actually going on and that we were all right about what we were saying, it'll be too late for them. So this is just part, this is how they operate, right? The left and right, two sides working together on stage, getting people gaslit on both sides. And when they bring up things like the climate, when they bring that up, you'll never, ever hear these conservatives talk about the government doing it to their own citizens, weather control and weather modification. You'll hear them talk about crazy climate cult. These are the talking points that they've put in people's minds. Crazy climate cults. Oh, all the Democrats want is to make money with green vehicles. These are all very just generic things that they're planting in people's minds without telling the conservatives out there that they're literally murdering people with the weather, that they have the ability to do it and they're doing it. And you see the pattern here. This is what I warned about with red and blue states. They're drilling the red states, and conservatives who are mainly Christian are sitting ducks in those states. Those are the same people who will not be on board with global communism, who will not give up their guns. Christians are the enemy to the New World Order, and they're going to do whatever they can to herd people like cattle to do what they say. They are going to force you into compliance. And of course, this all this stuff is able to go on because most of the sheeple out there are on board with censoring speech and of course not allowing people to actually expose what these people are really doing. And as you heard earlier in the video, right out of the guy's own mouth, he's become friends with the shooters, right? I mean, if there was ever a Freudian slip, that would be it. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.